The smell of disinfectant and old sweat clung to the gym floor as Mason Hale wiped away another day's worth of footsteps, until boots with gold stripes stopped beside his mop. It was 2100 hours at Fleet Training Base Echo, and the night had swallowed the compound in cold Pacific air. The hum of ventilation filled the silence between metal clinks and faint laughter echoing from the sparring ring. Mason worked alone most nights, unseen, unbothered, a quiet shadow in gray coveralls. His ID badge swung at his chest like a medal that no longer shined. Before we begin this mission, hit subscribe and ring the bell, because some stories of courage never made the headlines, but they deserve to be heard. Tell us where you're watching from and who's the hero in your family. From across the room came a burst of laughter. Younger cadets winding down after drills. They spoke too loudly, too freely, unaware of how sound carried through empty halls. "Bet the janitor used to polish boots, not floors," one said. Another snorted. "He holds that mop like it's a rifle." Mason didn't look up. He'd learned long ago that words couldn't bruise what was already healed over. He simply rinsed the mop head and continued down the corridor line, steady and unhurried. Then came a different voice, firm, controlled, unmistakably superior in tone. "Cadet Avery, language," said Admiral Catherine Steele, known across the Pacific Fleet as Ironclad. The laughter snapped off. Boots shuffled to attention. Mason turned slightly, enough to see her reflection in the polished floor, silver insignia catching the light like a blade. She moved with the precision of someone who'd been at war with time itself. Steele's gaze swept the room before settling on the janitor still mopping near the ring. "You're thorough," she said, voice even. "This place looks better than my office." Mason offered a small nod. "Just doing my job, ma'am." The simplicity of his reply seemed to linger in the air longer than it should have. Chief Petty Officer Ramon Ortiz, callsign Bear, stepped forward with an easy grin. "Careful, Admiral. Guy swings that mop like a baton. Might give us a run for our money." Laughter rippled again, cautious this time, seeking permission. Steele's eyebrow lifted. "Is that so?" she asked. Her attention returned to Mason, studying his posture, the squared shoulders, the unthinking discipline in how he stood, even when resting. "What's your name?" "Mason Hale." "You prior service, Hale?" He hesitated. "No, ma'am, just a janitor." Ortiz smirked. "Could have fooled me. Those arms say otherwise." Steele crossed her arms, intrigued now. "Tell you what, Bear, why don't you see if he can handle himself in the ring?" Ortiz barked a laugh. "What, me? Against the mop man?" "I was joking," Mason said softly, but the Admiral's grin turned sharp. "Then take it as a morale exercise. Just a little fun to end the day." Her words carried the faintest edge of challenge. Everyone in the gym knew what that tone meant. Orders disguised as suggestion. Ortiz cracked his knuckles. "Your call, Ironclad, but I won't go easy on him." Mason sighed and leaned the mop against the wall. "Ma'am, with respect." Steele interrupted, calm but curious. "No rank here tonight, Hale. Just gloves and grit." He looked down at his hands, scarred in ways cleaning never caused. Something in her voice, the mix of command and genuine curiosity, tugged at a corner of the past he'd buried deep. He didn't want this. Not again. But he also knew refusing outright would draw more attention than accepting. "All right," he said at last, "just for fun." The cadets erupted in laughter and cheers. Ortiz tossed Mason a pair of training gloves, caught midair with reflexes far too sharp for a janitor. The Admiral noticed. Her gaze narrowed. The mat cleared, tension thick. Ortiz stepped up, smirking. "Try not to slip on your mop water." Mason's faint smile didn't reach his eyes. The bell rang. Ortiz jabbed playfully. Mason slid aside, motion smooth and exact. Steele's breath hitched. That wasn't luck. It was muscle memory. Ortiz attacked again, faster. Mason deflected, whispered, You're leading too early with your right. Then tapped Ortiz's chest, gentle, surgical. The Jim fell silent. Ortiz steadied, grin fading. Okay, maybe not a joke. Continue, Steele ordered softly. Mason didn't fight. He flowed. Every strike missed, every move efficient. His janitor badge swung like a medal, and Steele realized she wasn't watching a custodian, but a soldier who'd never stopped training. Ortiz dropped his guard, chest heaving. You were trained. Mason said nothing. The silence was its own confession. Admiral Steele took a step closer to the mat. You handle yourself well, Hale. Where'd you learn that? He wiped his brow with the back of his hand. Just picked up a few things over the years. Those few things look a lot like CQB pattern Delta 7, she said. Her tone was casual, but her eyes searched his face. You sure you never wore the uniform? Mason looked at her directly for the first time. Uniforms don't make soldiers, ma'am. The Admiral studied him for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Finally, she nodded toward the ring. Well, gentlemen, I think that's enough fun for tonight. Mr. Hale, you've given us something to talk about. The cadets dispersed in murmurs. Ortiz approached, rubbing his ribs. You've got moves, brother, he said quietly. Guess I owe the mop man an apology. Mason chuckled softly. None needed. As the gym emptied, Steele lingered by the doorway. She turned once more before leaving. Hale, she said, be here at 0900 tomorrow. I want to see what else you picked up over the years. The door closed behind her. The sound of the ocean drifted faintly through the vents. Mason stood alone again, staring at the ring, at the mop leaning against the wall, at his reflection in the polished floor. For a man trying to live quietly, he just made more noise than he wanted to in years. He exhaled slowly, the weight of memory pressing down like the tide outside the base walls. The mop water rippled at his feet. Somewhere deep inside, the soldier he used to be stirred, awake, uncertain, and very much alive. Tomorrow, he thought, would not be just another night on the cleaning shift. Something had been set in motion, and the quiet man with the mop was about to remind them all what silence could do. What began as laughter in the ring turned to silence when the janitor moved like a ghost. The gym lights buzzed overhead, their glow turning the sweat on the mats into streaks of dull silver. It was 2130 hours at Fleet Training Base Echo, and what had started as a joke was quickly becoming something else. The recruits gathered at the edge of the ring, some still smirking, others whispering bets. Admiral Steele stood with arms crossed, her expression half amusement, half scrutiny. Chief Petty Officer Ortiz bounced on his heels inside the ropes, rolling his shoulders eager to make the janitor sweat. Mason Hale stood across from him, calm, expressionless, gloves hanging loose at his sides. Ortiz grinned. Don't freeze up on me, mop man. Mason didn't respond. He adjusted his stance slightly, weight balanced on the balls of his feet, knees relaxed. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't textbook boxing. But something about it made Lieutenant Nguyen, watching from the side, tilt her head. That's not random, she murmured. That's trained. The first exchange was playful. Ortiz feinting with a jab, Mason stepping back, deflecting with the smooth economy of motion that comes from years of repetition. Ortiz's second punch came faster, a right cross meant to sting, but Mason dipped under it and pivoted. The sound of shifting shoes on the mat was the only noise. Ortiz blinked, off balance for a fraction of a second before laughing. Okay, you've done this before, Mason said quietly. A long time ago. From her post near the ropes, Admiral Steele's gaze sharpened. She'd seen that turn before. The seamless shift of weight, the pivot from defense to control. It wasn't taught in standard Navy combatives anymore. It belonged to another era, another set of men. Ortiz lunged again, testing him. Mason countered, catching his forearm, rotating through the motion in a way that looked instinctual. Ortiz found himself on the edge of the mat before he knew it. Mason had stopped him mid-move. No strike, no aggression, just quiet precision. The recruits went still. Steele uncrossed her arms. "Interesting form, Hale. You sure you're just a janitor?" "Ma'am," he said, breathing evenly. "Some habits take a while to clean off." Ortiz wiped his brow and laughed. "All right, Ironclad, I'm not done yet. Let's see if this ghost bleeds." He reset, circling. Mason didn't posture or taunt. He moved lightly, almost fluid, his eyes never leaving Ortiz's shoulders. The next rush was faster. A low sweep, an elbow, a grab. Mason reacted before the second motion finished, locking the elbow, stepping in close, redirecting the force. Ortiz hit the mat with a grunt that echoed across the gym. The recruits gasped. Mason released him instantly and stepped back, expression unreadable. Nguyen's whisper broke the stunned quiet. "That's CQB pattern Delta 7. Steele turned toward her. "What did you say?" "It's an old SEAL close quarters pattern, ma'am. Decommissioned 10 years ago. Nobody teaches it anymore." Steele's heartbeat quickened, though her face stayed neutral. Delta 7. She had studied that maneuver from declassified footage, archived long before she earned her command. The footwork, the reversal, the break, all matched perfectly. She looked at the man in gray coveralls, the one who mopped her gym floor, and for the first time in years, she didn't know what to say. Ortiz pushed himself up, grinning despite the ache. "Okay, Hale, guess I deserved that." He gestured for Steele to join him. "Admiral, maybe we tag team. You take one side, I take the other. Let's really test him." The recruits cheered, sensing the absurdity of it all. A janitor against an admiral and her top trainer. Steele hesitated for half a beat, then slipped off her jacket and stepped into the ring. "Fine. Let's see what you've got, Mr. Hale." 2 against 1. Mason didn't argue. He simply nodded, rolling his wrists, eyes calm. The next seconds blurred into movement. Ortiz came in first, heavy strikes meant to distract. Steele followed with sharp, technical hits, measured, strategic. Mason weaved between them, blocking, turning, letting momentum carry each of their attacks away. He never hit back. He redirected, controlled, and released. Every move was efficient, silent, and devastatingly precise. Ortiz swung wide. Mason ducked, pivoted, and with a half-step shift, trapped his arm and guided him into Steele's incoming shoulder. The collision was gentle but decisive, both of them stumbling. Steele landed on her feet, stunned more by the impossibility of what just happened than the impact itself. Ortiz laughed breathlessly. "No way," he muttered. Steele froze. Mason had just used the ghost fold, a move from Tier 1 training, long classified. Her breath caught. "That's not possible," she whispered. Recruits murmured, phones half raised, unsure if this was a show or history resurfacing. Mason straightened, helped Ortiz up. "You good?" he asked. Ortiz nodded, wide-eyed. Steele stepped closer. "Where did you learn that move?" Mason gave a faint smile. "It's been a while, Admiral. Some things don't fade." Ortiz muttered, "He's been mopping floors but moves like a SEAL instructor." Silence followed, just the hum of lights and the distant surf. Steele extended her hand. "Mr. Hale, that was remarkable. You've got control most people never reach." He shook her hand once. Control's all that's left when everything else is gone. The recruits watched in awe as Mason quietly retrieved his mop, the legend fading back into ordinary. As the crowd dispersed, Steele remained where she stood, watching him leave. Nguyen approached her hesitantly. "Ma'am," she said, "that pattern, it was yours, wasn't it? The one from the old SEAL archives?" Steele's eyes followed Mason as he disappeared down the corridor. "No," she said quietly. "It wasn't mine. It was his." She turned away, expression unreadable, her thoughts already racing toward the truth she intended to uncover by morning. The storm had broken, but the real reckoning hadn't yet begun. Dawn rose over the Pacific, but the base was still whispering about the man who fought like a legend and mopped like a ghost. Word of the Spar had traveled faster than the morning tide. In the cafeteria line, in the barracks, even in the control tower, everyone had a version of the story. But only Admiral Steele knew the truth she needed to confirm, and she wasn't one to leave questions unanswered. Her office overlooked the training field, blinds half closed against the sunrise. The air still smelled faintly of salt and disinfectant. Mason Hale stood across from her, his gray janitor's uniform folded neatly at the cuffs, his ID badge hanging like a medal over his chest. He looked tired, but calm, too calm for a man who had just embarrassed an admiral in front of her own unit. Steele folded her arms. "You fought like someone who's done more than mop floors. You want to tell me how a janitor knew SEAL-level CQB patterns?" Mason didn't meet her eyes. "Old habits," he said quietly. "Some don't wash off." She studied him for a moment. The muscles in her jaw flexed. "That move you used, the pivot lock and sweep, that was Delta 7. It hasn't been taught since before I enlisted. I've only seen it in archives, and last night you used it like you invented it." Silence filled the room. The faint hum of ventilation seemed louder than before. Mason exhaled slowly. "That's because I did." The Admiral blinked. The words landed heavier than a confession. He continued, his voice even, deliberate. "Chief Instructor, Close Quarters Division, SEAL Group 5. Call sign, Ghost. I left the service 12 years ago." Steele leaned forward slightly. "Why would a man like you walk away?" He glanced at the photo frame on her desk, her own family, smiling on some long-forgotten beach. His tone softened. "My wife was killed in a car crash. Emma was 3. The teams offered to take me back after the funeral. I said no. My daughter needed her dad more than the Navy needed another ghost." Steele's posture eased. For a moment, rank disappeared. Only 2 soldiers remained, one still wearing the uniform, one who had outgrown it. "You could have come back," she said. "We could use someone like you. The recruits could learn from you again." Mason smiled faintly. "I am teaching, Admiral. Just not in your classrooms." He nodded toward the window where the gym glimmered in morning light. "They'll remember last night longer than any drill." Steele looked out, recruits whispering, glancing toward her office. "You embarrassed an admiral," she said. "Wasn't my intent," Mason replied. "You asked. I answered." Her lips curved slightly. "Ironclad got dented." "Ironclad never breaks," he said. "That's why we followed people like you." She studied him, the calm, the stories behind his eyes. "You were one of the legends. Ghost. Vanished mid-operation." He shrugged. "Some ghosts learn to live quiet." "Recognition?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "No, I just cleaned the place that built me." Steele nodded. "Thank you for reminding us what strength really looks like." Steele stepped onto the platform. She caught sight of the paper in his hands and hesitated. Without thinking, she turned toward him. "Ghost!" she called, voice cutting through the courtyard. Every head turned. Mason froze. She met his eyes. "Ironclad to Ghost," she said again, this time softer, almost reverent. Then she raised her hand to her brow and saluted. Gasps rippled through the ranks. Admirals didn't salute civilians. But in that moment, the regulation books didn't matter. It wasn't about chain of command. It was about recognition of something deeper, older, and purer than rank. Mason stood still for a heartbeat, then slowly returned the salute. The paper slipped from his fingers, fluttering to the ground between them. The recruits straightened instinctively, sensing the gravity even if they didn't understand it. Steele dropped her hand, nodded once, and turned back toward the formation. "Let this be a reminder," she said quietly. "Greatness doesn't always wear stripes." As the units dispersed, Mason bent to pick up the drawing. The morning breeze lifted the edges, brushing away the dust. He folded it carefully and tucked it into his breast pocket. At the gate, Emma was waiting. Small backpack, big smile. She ran into his arms. "Daddy, everyone's talking about you." He chuckled, lifting her off the ground. "Good things, I hope. They said you beat an admiral." He laughed softly. "No, sweetheart. I just showed her how to fall with grace." Steele watched from the distance, the wind catching her uniform. For the first time in years, she felt something like peace settle in her chest. She turned to the flag rising above the base and whispered, "Some heroes never retired. They just changed uniforms." As Mason carried Emma down the sunlit path, her laughter echoing through the morning air, the base seemed to exhale. The legend of Ghost would fade back into rumor, but for those who saw it, respect would never fade. And in the training ring, the floor still bore faint scuffs from the night before, a quiet reminder that even ghosts can leave marks. Some stories don't end. They just stand at attention, waiting for the next salute.